5 days without food, a dying child turning blue in her arms, and every door in town slammed shut in her face. Clara McAllister had killed her husband to save her daughter. Now Texas wanted her dead, and the only person willing to help was a scarred stranger with blood on his hands and a price on his head. He said 4 words that changed everything. Come with me. But salvation always comes with a price. And in the Wyoming wilderness, surrounded by wolves, both animal and human, Clara would discover that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the only one worth trusting. What happens when 2 killers fall in love? When a monster in a gentleman's suit wants to own you? When the only way out is through fire and blood? This is a story about second chances, about broken people finding each other in the darkest places, about learning that home is not where you run from, but who you run to. Sometimes the people who scare us the most are the ones who will fight the hardest to keep us safe. And sometimes the only way to stop running is to find someone worth standing still for. If you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from today. I want to see how far Clara and Caleb's story travels. Hit that like button if you are ready for a love story that will break your heart and put it back together stronger. The blizzard came down on Wyoming territory like the wrath of God himself. Clara McAllister pressed her back against the rotting wall of an abandoned horse barn, holding her daughter so tight she could feel the child's ribs through the thin blanket. Lily had not cried in 2 days, had not spoken since Texas. Her lips were blue. Her breathing came in whispers so faint Clara had to press her ear against the tiny chest just to know her baby was still alive. Day 5, without food. Clara had given Lily the last piece of stale bread 2 days ago. Her own stomach had stopped hurting yesterday, and she knew what that meant. The body surrenders eventually. It just gives up fighting and waits for the end. Outside, the wind screamed through cracks in the walls. 20 below zero. Maybe colder. The kind of cold that kills quick if you are lucky and slow if you are not. Clara thought about her mama back in Missouri, dead these 10 years now. Mama used to say God does not give us more than we can carry. But Mama was wrong. Or maybe God made a mistake with Clara McAllister. She had been carrying too much for too long, and tonight she was going to drop it all, not herself. She did not matter anymore. But Lily, please, if anyone is listening, do not let my baby die because of my sins. She closed her eyes and remembered the general store that morning, the way the owner's wife had looked at her like she was something scraped off a boot heel. We do not give charity to runaways. I know who you are, Mrs. McAllister. Texas wants you back. Maybe I should send a telegram. Clara had run. Again, always running. Now there was nowhere left to run to. The barn door groaned. Clara's hand went to the knife at her belt. A pitiful blade, barely sharp enough to cut bread. But it was all she had left, and she would use it. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the white hell outside. Massive, at least 6.5 feet tall, shoulders broad enough to fill the frame. The wind whipped snow around him like he was some kind of demon risen from the storm. Then the clouds shifted and moonlight caught his face. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, like someone had tried to split his head open and mostly succeeded. His eyes were gray as winter steel and just as cold. He did not speak, just stood there, looking. Clara positioned herself between this stranger and Lily. The knife shook in her hand. Everything shook. Everything. Stay back, I will cut you. I swear to God, I will cut you. The man's gaze moved from Clara to the bundle in her arms. He went completely still. Not like a man thinking, like a predator deciding whether to pounce. Then he did something Clara did not expect. He knelt down, slowly, deliberately, making himself smaller. His eyes came level with hers. The child. His voice was rough, like he had not talked to another living soul in months. Is she breathing? Get away from us. How long since she ate? I said get away. He did not move, did not reach for her, just stayed there on one knee in the snow blowing through the door. "I am not going to hurt you, or her." His voice dropped to something quieter, almost gentle. "But that blizzard will. You have maybe 2 hours before this barn is buried. Another hour after that before you both freeze. Why do you care?" Something flickered across his scarred face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. I do not know yet. He reached into his coat. Clara raised the knife higher, ready to strike. But he only pulled out a small wrapped package, unwrapped it carefully. Peppermint sticks, the kind they sold at general stores for a penny each. Does she like sweets? Clara could not speak, could only stare at this monster of a man holding out candy like some kind of offering. He broke off a tiny piece, held it toward Clara, not Lily, giving her the choice. Sugar will help. Give her something to burn. Then we need to move. Move where? I have a place. 3 miles from here. Warm, safe. He met her eyes. Or you can stay here and die. Your choice. Clara looked at her daughter, at the blue lips, at the stillness that was more terrifying than any scream could ever be. She looked at the stranger with his scar and his cold eyes and his peppermint candy. She thought about Thomas, about every man who had ever promised her safety and delivered pain instead. About the day she said "I do" and learned too late that those words meant "I own you." But Lily's breathing was getting shallower. Clara took the peppermint, placed it on her daughter's tongue, watched the tiny mouth close around it weakly, watched Lily begin to suck. "If you hurt her," Clara whispered, "I will kill you." Fair enough. He stood and pulled off his heavy buffalo coat, wrapped it around both Clara and Lily in one motion. Then he lifted the child from Clara's arms, so gently it made her chest ache. "Can you walk?" Yes. She was not sure it was true. "Then follow me. Stay close. Do not stop for anything." He turned and walked out into the blizzard. Clara followed. Not because she trusted him. She had learned a long time ago not to trust anyone. But because there was nothing left to lose. The cold hit her like a wall. Wind so sharp it felt like knives on her skin. Snow so thick she could barely see the man 3 feet ahead of her. 3 miles. It might as well have been 300. By the second mile, Clara was falling. Her legs would not obey anymore. Ice in her lungs. The world going gray at the edges. She went down on her knees in a drift. Tried to rise. Could not. Get up. The man had stopped, turned. Lily still cradled against his chest. I cannot." He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, grabbed the back of her collar with his free hand, and hauled her upright. "You die out here, she dies too. Keep moving. Not kind, not gentle, just true." Clara hated him for it, and kept moving. She did not know how long they walked. Time had no meaning in that white hell. There was only the man's broad back ahead of her, only Lily's blanket getting whiter with snow, only the burning in her lungs and the numbness spreading through her limbs. Then lights appeared through the storm, yellow and warm, like something from a dream. A house. No, not a house. A fortress. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, heavy timber door reinforced with iron, built to withstand armies. The man kicked open the door and stepped inside. Clara stumbled after him into warmth so sudden it made her gasp. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, flames already burning bright. Someone had left the fire stoked. The man, she realized. He had left this fire burning before going out into the storm. Why? Where had he been going? She looked around the room. Gun racks on every wall, maps covered in markings in one corner, a locked iron chest that drew her eye. This was not a home. This was where a man went to disappear, or to wait for enemies who never stopped coming. The stranger laid Lily on a leather sofa near the fire, moved with practiced efficiency. Heated water, warmed goat's milk in a tin cup, mixed in honey from a ceramic jar. Clara tried to take the cup. Her hands shook too badly. Milk spilled on the rough wooden floor. Without a word, he took the cup back, sat beside Lily, lifted the child's head with one large calloused hand. Slow sips, little one. His voice dropped to something almost soft. Too fast, and it will come back up. He fed her drop by drop. Patient, careful, like he had done this before. Clara watched, something cracking open in her chest that she did not understand. You have children? She asked. No. You know how to handle them. I know how to keep things from dying. That is not the same thing. He finally looked at her. Something hollow in those gray eyes. It is for me. Color returned to Lily's cheeks. She swallowed milk. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at this terrifying, scarred giant leaning over her, and she did not scream. Instead, she reached up with one tiny hand and touched his scar, traced it from temple to jaw. The man froze, stopped breathing. Lily made a small sound. Not a word, just a sigh. Then she closed her eyes and slept. Real sleep. Not the terrible stillness of death approaching. Actual rest. The stranger sat there for a long moment with the child's hand still on his ruined face. Clara saw his jaw working, saw him swallow hard. When he finally stood, he would not look at her. There is a room in the back. Door has a bolt on the inside. Lock it tonight. Why? Because you do not know me, and you should not trust anyone you do not know. He walked away, left her standing there by the fire with 1,000 questions and no answers. That night, Clara lay in the small back room with Lily warm against her chest. She should sleep. God knew she needed it, but she could not. Through the walls, she heard him moving, pacing back and forth, like something caged. Then, around midnight, a scream, a man's voice ragged with terror. Emily. No. Emily. Clara's hand went to her knife, but there was no sound of danger. No footsteps approaching, just a man caught in nightmare, screaming a name that meant nothing to her. She lay awake until dawn, listening to him walk the floors like a wounded animal. She did not know who Emily was, but she knew that scream. Knew it like she knew her own heartbeat. It was the scream of someone who had killed and could not forget. She heard it in her own voice every night, calling a different name. Thomas, her husband, who had come for Lily with an axe. Thomas, whose blood she had scrubbed from her hands for 3 days and still could not wash away. Maybe that was why she did not run when the sun came up. Maybe some part of her recognized a fellow ghost, or maybe she was just too tired to run anymore. Either way, when morning light crept through the frost-covered window, Clara McAllister was still there. And for the first time in 4 years, she was not alone. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of wood crackling in the fireplace. For one disorienting moment, she did not know where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The blizzard, the stranger, the 3-mile walk through hell. Lily still slept beside her, breathing deep and even, color in her cheeks, lips pink instead of blue. Clara's eyes burned. She pressed her face into her daughter's hair and let herself cry. Silent tears that she had been holding back for months, maybe years. When she finally pulled herself together, she checked the room. Small, spare, clean. A narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked mirror, a window looking out on a world buried in white, and a door with a bolt on the inside. Exactly like he had said. She unbolted it and stepped into the main room. The stranger stood at the stove with his back to her, big as a mountain, even in the soft morning light. He wore a different shirt now, sleeves rolled up past his forearms. She could see more scars there. Knife marks. What looked like old rope burns. "Coffee is hot," he said without turning around. "There is biscuits in the warmer." Clara moved to the table, sat down because her legs still felt like water, watched him work. He cooked the way he did everything else. Efficient. Purposeful. No wasted movement. "I do not know your name," she said. "Caleb. Caleb Thornton. I am Clara. Clara McAllister. I know." He turned then, holding a plate of eggs and bacon. "You talk in your sleep." Her blood went cold. "What did I say?" "Enough." He set the plate in front of her, poured coffee into a tin cup. His face gave nothing away. "Eat," he said. "You look like you have not had a real meal in weeks." She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but the smell of that food hit her empty stomach and she could not speak, could not do anything except pick up the fork and start shoveling food into her mouth like an animal. He did not watch her eat, turned back to the stove and started on another plate. By the time Lily woke up, there was hot porridge with honey waiting for her. The child ate slowly, eyes darting around the strange room, but she did not cry, did not speak either. "She still has not talked?" Caleb asked quietly. Clara shook her head. "Not for a while now." He nodded like he understood, did not push. After breakfast, he showed her around the ranch. It was bigger than she had expected. A fortress of a main house surrounded by outbuildings. A barn that could hold a dozen horses. Chicken coops and a small dairy with a gentle cow named Bessie. Fenced pastures now buried under snow. But everything was falling apart. Fences broken. Roof on the barn sagging. Tools rusted and scattered. "You have let this place go," Clara said. "Had no reason to keep it up." "What changed?" He looked at her then, long and steady. "Jury is still out on that." In the barn, she met Samson, the massive black stallion who had carried Lily through the blizzard. Up close, the horse was even more intimidating. 17 hands at least, with a mean eye and a way of stamping that said he did not suffer fools. "Careful," Caleb said. "He bites." Lily had been trailing behind them, silent as a shadow. Now she walked right up to Samson's stall. Clara lunged to grab her, but Caleb held up a hand. "Wait!" Samson lowered his huge head, sniffed at Lily's hair. The child reached up and touched his muzzle. And then she spoke. "Horse." One word, soft as a whisper. But the first word she had said since that night in Texas. Clara's heart stopped. Tears sprang to her eyes again, and she did not bother to hide them this time. But Lily was not looking at her mother. She was looking at Caleb. "Pretty horse." Caleb crouched down, eye level with the child. "That is Samson. He is not pretty. He is mean and stubborn. Like you?" Something flickered across Caleb's scarred face. Surprise, maybe, or the ghost of a smile. "Yeah, like me." Clara watched them together. Joy flooded through her. Lily was talking. Lily was healing. But underneath the joy, something else twisted in her chest. Something she did not want to name. Her daughter had spoken to this stranger first, not to her. After everything Clara had sacrificed, everything she had done to protect Lily, the child had opened up to a scarred, silent man she had known for one day. It should not matter. It was petty and selfish to care, but she cared anyway. That night, after Lily was asleep, Clara explored the house. She told herself she was looking for something to clean. That was a lie. In a drawer in his bedroom, she found it. A yellowed piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times the creases were wearing through. A wanted poster. Wanted. Kane Thornton. $500. Murder. The sketch showed a younger Caleb. Same scar. Same cold eyes. Clara took the poster, hid it in her apron, waited. He came in from checking the animals just after dark. Snow in his hair, and ice on his beard. He stopped when he saw her sitting by the fire. "Something you want to say?" Clara pulled out the poster. "Who is Kane Thornton?" He went very still, like a rattlesnake coiling to strike. "Where did you hear that name?" "I found this." She held it out. He crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched it from her hand, looked at it for a long moment. Then he fed it to the fire. "Kane Thornton died 5 years ago, but you are still wanted for murder. I did not kill the man they say I did, but you killed others." He met her eyes. No flinching, no excuses. More than I can count. Clara should have been afraid. Should have grabbed Lily and run into the night. But she stayed in her chair by the fire and looked right back at him. "And you expect me to trust you?" "I do not expect anything from you." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to see his face. "You want to leave? There is the door. You want to stay? Stay. But do not pretend you are better than me." "I never said I see how you flinch when doors slam, how you check every exit when you enter a room, how you keep that knife under your pillow even here. That is survival. That is what someone looks like after they have done something they cannot undo." He paused. "I know because I see it in the mirror every morning." Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled and popped. "Whatever you are running from," he said finally, "whatever you did, I do not care. Everyone has blood on their hands. The only question is whether you can still wash them clean." He walked away, left her standing there with her secrets heavy in her chest. That night, Clara lay awake again. She thought about Caleb's words, about blood on hands that would not wash clean. She thought about Thomas, about the night he came home with whiskey on his breath and an axe in his hands, about the way he had looked at Lily's bedroom door and said, "Time to fix my mistake." She thought about the sound an iron skillet makes when it connects with a man's skull. 2 killers, 1 roof, 1 child between them. This was either salvation or damnation waiting to happen. Clara could not tell which. But for the first time in 4 years, she was not running, and maybe that was enough, for now. 2 weeks passed. Clara fell into a rhythm. Up before dawn. Milk Bessie. Collect eggs from the chickens. Start breakfast while Caleb checked the horses and cleared snow from the paths. They did not talk much, did not need to. 2 people who had learned that words were often weapons moved carefully around each other, giving space, keeping distance. But the distance was shrinking. Lily was the bridge between them. Every day she spoke a little more. Horse became pretty. Horse became Samson is my friend. She followed Caleb everywhere, a small shadow in his massive wake, and he let her. More than let her. He made room for her. Clara watched him crouch down to show Lily how to collect eggs without frightening the hens. Watched him boost the child onto Samson's broad back and lead them around the corral, patient as stone. Watched him whittle a tiny horse from a piece of pine while Lily sat beside him by the fire, chattering about everything and nothing. She still did not talk much to Clara. That wound festered quietly, though Clara tried to ignore it. One morning, Caleb found Clara in the kitchen trying to make bread. She had found flour in the pantry, had started mixing dough the way her mama taught her a lifetime ago. She was good at this, used to bake every morning for Thomas before. "Do not touch my things." Caleb's voice was hard. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and took the bowl right out of her hands. "I was making breakfast." Clara did not back down. "To earn our keep. I did not ask for payment, and I did not ask for charity." They stood there glaring at each other. 2 stubborn people who had survived by not yielding to anyone. "I will not be a burden," Clara said. "I will not owe anyone anything. I will work for whatever you give us. Food, shelter, all of it. Fair wage for fair work. I do not need a housekeeper." "No." Clara looked around at the dusty corners, the unwashed windows, the general air of neglect that hung over everything. "You need someone to stop you from drinking yourself to death in this tomb. When is the last time anyone lived here? And I mean lived, not just existed. Long silence. Then Caleb laughed. A harsh, rusty sound, like something dragged out of disuse. You have nerve, I will give you that. Nerve is all I have left. He studied her face. Whatever he saw there made some of the hardness leave his eyes. Fine. You want work, there is plenty. Ranch is falling apart because I stopped caring. You want to fix it? Go ahead. But you stay away from my personal things. And you do not ask questions. Clara agreed. For now. The questions would come later. When she was ready. When he was ready. Or when neither of them could avoid the truth any longer. Spring came slow to Wyoming territory. The snow began to melt in patches, revealing dead grass and frozen mud. Creeks started running again. Birds returned. The world that had seemed so dead began to breathe. Lily was healthier every day, running instead of walking, laughing instead of sitting silent. She named all the animals on the ranch: Bessie the cow, Samson the horse, General Cluck the rooster who thought he ran everything. She started calling Caleb by name. Then she started calling him Cal. He did not correct her. One night, Clara woke to the sound of screaming. Not Caleb this time. Lily. She was out of bed and running before she was fully awake. Burst through the door to find Lily sitting up in bed, eyes wild with terror, sobbing. Mama, Mama, the bad man. He was here. He was coming for me. Clara gathered her daughter into her arms, rocked her back and forth. It was just a dream, baby. Just a dream. The bad man cannot hurt you anymore. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. Thomas was dead, she had made sure of that. But the law did not see it the way she did. The law called it murder. The law wanted her back in Texas to stand trial and probably hang. And wherever she went, the law could follow. She heard footsteps in the hall, looked up to see Caleb standing in the doorway. He wore only his trousers, and in the lamplight she could see his chest clearly for the first time. Scars everywhere. Knife wounds and bullet holes and what looked like burn marks. A brand on one shoulder, like someone had tried to mark him as property. This was the body of a man who had been fighting and being punished his entire life. Their eyes met. He did not come closer, did not intrude. Is she all right? Nightmare. Clara stroked Lily's hair. She will be fine. He nodded, turned to go. Caleb. He stopped. Thank you for giving us somewhere safe to have nightmares. Something shifted in his expression, softened. We all have them, he said quietly. The trick is having somewhere safe to wake up. Then he was gone. The nightmares kept coming. Not just for Lily, for Clara too, and for Caleb, though he never spoke of his. But Clara heard him. Walking the floors at night, sometimes talking in his sleep, names she did not recognize. Emily, Sarah, Emma, always said with such anguish that it made her chest ache. One night she could not stand it anymore. She found him on the porch staring out at the moonlit mountains. A bottle of whiskey sat beside him, half empty. You should be sleeping, he said without looking at her. So should you, she sat down beside him. Not too close, but close enough. Who is Emily? He went rigid. The moonlight caught his scar and made it look even more brutal. Someone I killed. Clara did not gasp, did not flinch away. She had killed too, she understood. Tell me. Long silence. The wind moved through the pines. Somewhere an owl called. I used to be a bounty hunter, he said finally. They called me Cain, because I was good at bringing men in dead, better at it than bringing them in alive. Clara waited. 6 years ago, I was tracking a man named Harlan Pierce. Murderer, rapist. Had a $500 price on his head. I followed him for 3 weeks. Finally caught up to him in a little town in Montana. He paused, took a long drink from the bottle. He knew I was coming. Used a family as shields, wife, daughter. The daughter was 6 years old. Name was Emily. Clara's heart clenched. I had a clear shot at Pierce, took it. Bullet went through him and he stopped, swallowed hard, and through her. She was standing right behind him. I did not see her until it was too late. Oh, Caleb. She died in my arms, looking at me with these big blue eyes, trying to understand why it hurt, why the nice man who was supposed to save her family had put a bullet in her chest instead. His voice cracked on the last words. Clara reached over and took his hand. He flinched but did not pull away. I quit after that. Came here. Built this place. Tried to disappear. He laughed bitterly. But you cannot disappear from yourself. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. It was an accident. That does not make her any less dead. No. Clara squeezed his hand. But it means you are not a murderer. You made a terrible mistake. That is not the same thing. He looked at her then. Really looked. Like he was seeing her for the first time. Why are you being kind to me? Because I know what it feels like to carry something you cannot put down. Because I know what it is like to hear a name in your nightmares and wake up with blood on your hands. She had not meant to say that much. The words just came out. Caleb did not ask her to explain. Did not push. Just sat there, holding her hand in the moonlight while the world slept around them. They stayed that way until dawn. The next morning, everything was different. Not obviously, not in ways anyone else would notice, but Clara felt it. A shift in the air between them, a wall coming down. They still did not talk about the things that mattered, still circled around their secrets like wolves around a campfire. But now there was something else beneath the caution. Trust. Maybe, or the beginning of it. Spring turned the world green. Caleb started working on the ranch again. Really working, not just going through the motions. Clara helped where she could. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost like partnership. Lily bloomed like a wild flower after rain. She started talking to Clara again. Not as much as she talked to Cal, but enough. Enough to heal some of the hurt Clara had been carrying. One afternoon, Clara was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats on the road. 3 riders coming up from the direction of town. Men she did not recognize, but something about the way they moved made her stomach clench. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran for the house. Caleb. He was already at the window, rifle in hand. His face had gone hard and cold. The face of the man on the wanted poster. Get Lily. Take her to the root cellar. Stay there until I come for you. Who are they? Trouble. She did not argue. Grabbed Lily from the porch where she had been playing with a rag doll and ran. The root cellar was dark and cold and smelled of earth. Lily whimpered, "Shh, baby, we have to be quiet, like a game. Can you be quiet for Mama?" Lily nodded, pressed her face against Clara's shoulder. Above them, Clara heard voices. Caleb's low rumble and another man's higher, sharper tones. She could not make out the words. Then, a gunshot. Clara's heart stopped. She pressed her hand over Lily's mouth to keep the child from screaming. Silence. More silence. Then footsteps on the cellar door. It swung open and Caleb's face appeared above them, lit by afternoon sun. "It is safe. Come on up." Clara climbed out on shaking legs, looked around the yard. 3 horses stood riderless by the fence. 3 men lay in the dirt. 2 were groaning. 1 was not moving at all. "Bounty hunters," Caleb said flatly. "Heard there was a man matching my description up in these parts. Came to collect. Are they? 2 will live." He looked at the 3rd man, the one who was not moving. He drew first. Clara should have been horrified. Should have been afraid of this man who could kill so easily. But all she felt was relief. Are there more coming? Maybe. Probably. He met her eyes. "You should leave. Take Lily. Go somewhere safe." "Where?" Clara laughed without humor. "There is nowhere safe for me. and apparently nowhere safe for you either. You do not want to be here when more come. You are right. I do not want to. She straightened her spine. But I am staying anyway. Someone has to watch your back while you are being noble and stupid. He stared at her. Something that might have been wonder crossed his face. Why? Because you watched mine first. Because Lily loves you. Because... She stopped, swallowed. Because I do not have anywhere else I want to be. It was the closest she had come to admitting what was growing between them. Caleb did not say anything, just reached out and touched her face, one rough thumb against her cheek. Then he turned to deal with the bodies. And Clara started making plans. Because she knew with bone-deep certainty that this was not over. The world had found them, and the world was not done yet. The riders who came for Caleb were just the beginning. A week later, Lily developed an ear infection. High fever, crying through the night, pulling at her ear until it bled. Clara tried every remedy she knew. Cool cloths, warm compresses, willow bark tea. Nothing worked. She needs real medicine, Clara said, from a doctor. Caleb's jaw tightened. I do not go to Bitter Creek. Then I will go alone. No. He blocked her path to the door. You do not know what that place is. What he is. Who? The man who owns everything and everyone in that town. But Lily's fever would not break. Her cries grew weaker, more pitiful. Clara could see her daughter slipping away again, and she would rather face any danger than watch that happen. We have to go. Both of us. Together. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then he cursed under his breath and grabbed his hat. Keep your head down. Do not talk to anyone you do not have to. And stay close to me no matter what. Bitter Creek was nothing like Clara expected. From the way Caleb talked, she had imagined some lawless frontier town full of outlaws and desperados. Instead, she found clean streets, painted buildings, a white church with a real steeple. Pretty, almost. Peaceful. But something was wrong. She could feel it in the air. The people moved too carefully. Their eyes darted toward a large building marked Blackwood Trading Company like they expected something to come out of it and bite them. No one smiled. This is not a town, Clara murmured. It is a kingdom. Caleb grunted. And everyone here is a subject. He led her to the apothecary, then positioned himself outside with the horses, hat pulled low over his face. Clara went in with Lily in her arms. The shop was well-stocked, clean, professional, a far cry from the dusty general stores Clara was used to. She found the medicine she needed quickly, brought it to the counter. The bell over the door chimed. Expensive cologne filled the air. Something floral and foreign that made Clara's nose itch. My. A new face in our little town. She turned. The man standing behind her was handsome in a way that made her skin crawl. Perfect teeth, silver-touched hair, tailored coat that cost more than most folks earned in a year. He moved like someone who had never been denied anything in his entire life. His eyes slid over Clara like she was a horse at auction. Evaluating, appraising, finding her wanting in some ways, valuable in others. You must be the woman Thornton has been hiding on that mountain of his. His smile never touched his eyes. News travels fast in Bitter Creek, especially interesting news. I am his housekeeper. Of course you are. He stepped closer. Too close. That is a sick child you are holding. Let me help. The doctor here is on my payroll. He can see her immediately. Thank you, but I can manage. Can you? His voice dropped. Intimate? Possessive? A woman alone with a child in a town she does not know. Some situations call for protection. I could offer that. A position in my household. Proper wages. Safety. Clara's blood went cold. She knew this game. Thomas had played it before they married. The charm, the offers of help, the slow closing of a trap around prey that did not realize it was being hunted. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Blackwood. Silas Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood. But I have employment. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. He was not used to refusal. With Thornton? That hermit? That... His smile thinned. Wanted man? Good day, sir. Clara tried to move past him. His hand closed on her arm. Not hard, but firm. Possessive. Like he already owned her and was just reminding her of the fact. I am offering you a chance. His voice had lost its warmth. Mrs.? My name is my business, and I will thank you to take your hand off me. The door opened. Caleb filled the frame. A wall of barely contained violence. Problem? Silas released Clara's arm smoothly. No problem at all, just welcoming a newcomer to our community. He smiled at Clara one last time. Think about my offer. Thornton will not live forever. Men with bounties rarely do. He tipped his hat and walked out. Clara could not stop shaking. Caleb did not speak until they were outside, mounting the horses, putting distance between themselves and that too-clean town. That was Silas Blackwood, he said finally. I gathered. He owns everything in Bitter Creek. The law, the church, the land. He wanted to buy my ranch years ago. I refused. What happened? Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Cattle died, barn burned, and then Caleb's jaw tightened. Then someone put a price on my head for a murder I did not commit. Blackwood framed you. Cannot prove it. But yes. Why have you not left? Gone somewhere he cannot reach. This is where they are buried. Clara's heart clenched. Who? My family. My wife. My daughter. His voice was like gravel. I will not leave them. The ride back to the ranch was silent. But that night, after Lily was asleep, Clara found Rosa Delgado's boarding house card in her pocket. The woman had pressed it into her hand as they were leaving town. If you ever need help, Rosa had whispered, come to me. Clara had not even remembered taking it. The next morning, Lily's fever broke. The medicine worked. Within 2 days, the child was running around the ranch again, chattering about Samson and the chickens and the frog she had found by the creek. But Clara could not shake the feeling of Silas Blackwood's hand on her arm, could not forget the way he had looked at her, like she was something to be acquired. You are thinking too loud, Caleb said one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. Lily was inside, playing with the wooden horse Caleb had carved for her. That man, Blackwood. He's not going to let this go, is he? No. What does he want? Everything. Caleb's face was carved from stone. He always has. When something is not for sale, he finds other ways to take it. He wants the ranch. He wants more than that. Caleb looked at her. He wants you. Clara felt the truth of it settle into her bones like cold. What did he do to his wife? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. She fell down the stairs. That is the official story. He paused. Rosa says Margaret tried to leave. Take their son. Run away from him. She fell 2 days later. Clara thought about Thomas. About the way he had looked at Lily's door with an axe in his hands. About the kind of man who would rather destroy something than let it go. I have known men like him, she said quietly. I know. Caleb's hand found hers in the growing dark. That is why we need to be careful. Whatever he is planning, it is not over. Men like Blackwood do not stop until they get what they want. Or until someone stops them. That would mean killing him. I have killed before. The words hung in the air between them. Clara felt Caleb go still beside her. She had not meant to say it, but she was tired of secrets. Tired of carrying the weight alone. Who? My husband. Thomas. She stared out at the darkening mountains. He was going to kill Lily. I stopped him. Self-defense. That is not what Texas calls it. Caleb turned to face her, lifted her chin with one rough finger so she had to meet his eyes. What do you call it? Survival. He nodded slowly. Then that is what it was. No judgment, no horror, no pulling away, just understanding. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. I am wanted for murder, same as you. I know. You knew? I have known since the first night. He almost smiled. You talk in your sleep, remember? And you let me stay anyway. You were dying. Your daughter was dying. What kind of man would I be if I turned you out for something you did to protect your child? Clara could not speak, could not find words for what was swelling in her chest, so she kissed him instead. It was clumsy and desperate, and nothing like the kisses she had known before. Not Thomas's claiming mouth or the fumbling of the boys she had known before him. This was two broken people reaching for each other across a gulf of pain and finding, somehow, a bridge. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb's forehead rested against hers. This is a mistake, he murmured. Probably. We have enough problems without adding more. Definitely. I should walk away. But you will not. No. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious. God help me, I will not. They did not go any further that night. Did not need to. The kiss was enough. A promise of what might be when they were ready. If they ever got the chance to be ready. Because somewhere in Bitter Creek, Silas Blackwood was planning, and when men like him planned, people died. It was only a matter of time. The wolves came on a moonless night. Clara woke to screaming, not human. Chickens, horses, the sounds of animals in mortal terror. She was out of bed and grabbing the shotgun before her eyes were fully open. Caleb had taught her to shoot over the past weeks. She was not great, but she was not helpless either. Through the window, she saw them. 7 wolves circling the chicken coop. Dark shapes against darker night, eyes gleaming yellow in the lamplight from the house. One had already gotten inside. She could see feathers flying, could hear the death cries of the birds. Clara did not think. She ran outside. The cold hit her like a fist. She was wearing nothing but her nightgown, bare feet in the snow, but she did not stop. Raised the shotgun, fired, missed. The wolves turned toward her. New threat, new prey. The alpha advanced. Bigger than a dog, bigger than anything she had imagined. Yellow eyes fixed on her like she was meat. Clara raised the gun again. Her hands were shaking. Then Caleb exploded from the darkness. He did not use a gun. He came at them with a knife and bare hands, moving like something feral, like he was one of them. A wolf among wolves. The pack scattered, but not fast enough. Caleb took down 2 before they could run. A third turned on him, and Clara saw its jaws close on his forearm. She fired again. This time she did not miss. The wolf fell. The others fled into the night. Caleb. Clara dropped the gun and ran to him. His arm was torn open, blood black in the moonlight. Oh God, Caleb, it is not as bad as it looks. It looks like you are dying. He almost smiled. Then I must be fine. She got him inside, boiled water, found needle and thread. Her hands steadied the way they always did in a crisis. She had patched up Thomas enough times to know how this worked. I need to stitch this, she said. Do it. She cut away his shirt and stopped. She had seen glimpses of his body before, knew there were scars. But this, knife wounds crisscrossed his torso. Bullet holes, some old, some newer. Something that looked like a brand on his shoulder, rope burns on his wrists. What happened to you, she whispered. Living happened. She stitched the wolf bite while he sat still as stone. He did not make a sound, but sweat poured down his face and his hand gripped the chair arm hard enough to crack the wood. When she was done, his skin was hot to the touch, fever setting in already. You need to rest. Cannot. Need to check the animals. The animals can wait. Clara pushed him toward the bedroom. You cannot. He was too weak to argue. Collapsed onto the bed and was unconscious in seconds. Clara sat beside him through the night. Somewhere around midnight he started talking. Fevered words, fragments of nightmare. Emily. I am sorry. I did not mean to. The bullet went through. I did not see her. She held his hand, stroked his hair, whispered reassurances he probably could not hear. Then the words changed. Sarah? Sarah, do not go. Please do not take Emma. I can change. I can... Why was I not enough? Why could you not love the man I was? Clara went still. Sarah, Emma. He had mentioned them before. His wife and daughter dead in a fire. But this did not sound like grief for the dead. This sounded like abandonment. When dawn came and his fever had broken, Clara went looking. She told herself she was searching for more bandages. That was a lie. In a drawer she had never opened, she found it. An old letter, yellowed and creased from being folded and refolded. A woman's handwriting. She should not read it. She read it anyway. Caleb, by the time you find this, Emma and I will be gone. I cannot live with a killer anymore. Every time you come home with blood on your hands, I see the man I married dying. Emma deserves better than a father who makes his living from death. Do not look for us. Do not try to find us. As far as you are concerned, we are already dead. I am sorry. Sarah. Clara's hands shook. The letter was dated 3 weeks before the fire. Sarah had not died. She had left, taken their daughter and staged the fire to make Caleb believe they were dead. His family was alive somewhere. He did not know. Clara heard movement behind her. Turned. Caleb stood in the doorway. His eyes went to the letter in her hands. Where did you find that? I was looking for bandages. She swallowed. Caleb, this says... I know what it says. He crossed the room, took the letter from her, stared at it like he had never seen it before. I found it 3 years ago, hidden in a loose floorboard. 3 years. You have known for 3 years that they are alive. Yes. And you never what? Went looking? He laughed bitterly. For what? She made herself clear. She could not love the man I was. She took Emma rather than let her grow up with a killer for a father. That was her choice. It does not mean she was right. Maybe not. Caleb folded the letter carefully. But it means I am not the man she needed me to be. And I have spent 5 years trying to figure out who I am instead. Clara touched his face, felt the scar under her fingers. Who have you figured out? Someone different. Someone trying to be better. He met her eyes. Someone who did not expect to ever want anything again until a woman with more courage than sense walked through a blizzard to save her daughter. Caleb, I should have told you. About the letter. About all of it. He caught her hand, held it against his chest. But I was afraid. Of what? That if you knew how broken I am, you would run. Clara almost laughed. We are all broken. That is not news. She stepped closer. What matters is what we do with the pieces. And what do you want to do? Stay. Clara heard the word come out of her mouth and realized it was true. I want to stay. I want to stop running. I want... She could not finish, could not say the words out loud. But Caleb understood anyway. He always did. He kissed her, not like before. Not tentative or questioning, this kiss was claiming, desperate. 2 people who had been alone for too long finally finding their way home. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara felt something shift in her chest, something that had been closed for a very long time beginning to open. We should not, she whispered. Probably not. This is going to make everything more complicated. Definitely. I should walk away. But you will not. She smiled. No. God help me, I will not. That night, for the first time, they did not sleep in separate rooms. Nothing happened beyond holding each other. They were not ready for more, not yet. But it was enough. It was more than enough. And in the morning, when Clara woke in Caleb's arms with sunlight streaming through the window and Lily's laughter floating up from the yard below, she understood something she had forgotten in the years of running and hiding and surviving. This was what home felt like. She had found it at last. Spring came slow, and then all at once. One week the world was white and frozen, the next green things pushed up through the mud. Creeks ran full with snowmelt, and the air smelled like possibility. 3 months since Clara had walked through a blizzard. 3 months since a scarred stranger had offered her peppermint candy and said, "Come with me." Everything had changed. Lily was a different child now, laughing, running, talking up a storm. She helped Clara in the kitchen, helped Caleb in the barn, named every animal on the ranch, and considered them all her personal friends. She called Caleb Cal now. Sometimes she called him Papa, then caught herself and blushed. He never corrected her. Clara and Caleb existed in careful orbit. After that night, they had not rushed, had not pushed. They shared a bed now, but kept their distance during the day, giving each other space to adjust to this new reality. But the distance was closing. Every day it got a little smaller. They were building something good, and then Silas Blackwood came to destroy it. Rosa Delgado rode up to the ranch one morning breathing hard, her horse lathered with sweat. She handed Clara a rolled piece of paper without a word. Clara unrolled it. Her own face stared back at her. Wanted, Clara McAllister, murder, $300, state of Texas. Her blood turned to ice. How did he get this? Blackwood has connections everywhere. Rosa's face was grim. Telegraph, hired men, informants in every town between here and the Gulf of Mexico. He has been looking into you ever since you refused him at the apothecary. He put this up all over Bitter Creek this morning. Clara's hands were shaking. She could not make them stop. What does he want? What do you think? Rosa spat on the ground. He is giving you a choice. Come to him willingly or be dragged back to Texas in chains. Neither. Then you need to tell Caleb everything before Blackwood uses it against you. I already know. They turned. Caleb stood in the doorway of the barn, face carved from stone. How much? Clara whispered. Enough. He crossed the yard in long strides, took the poster from her hands, stared at it for a long moment. Then he fed it to the fire burning in the outdoor forge. That will not stop him, Rosa said. No, but it is a start. Caleb looked at Clara. You and I need to talk. Rosa took Lily to play by the creek, leaving them alone. Clara told him everything. About Thomas, the drinking that got worse every year, the beatings that left her covered in bruises she had to hide, the way he talked about Lily like she was a burden, a mistake, a problem to be solved, about the night he came home with an axe and murder in his eyes. She was asleep, Clara said. Lily. I heard him on the stairs, heard him talking to himself. Time to fix my mistake, he kept saying. I was in the kitchen when he walked past. I saw the axe. She stopped, swallowed. I did not think. Just grabbed the skillet off the stove and swung. You saved your daughter's life. I killed my husband, a husband who was about to kill his own child. Caleb's voice was steady. That is not murder, Clara. That is survival. Texas does not see it that way. Thomas was the sheriff's son. They called it murder before my hands stopped shaking. Then Texas is wrong. She stared at him, waiting for the judgment, the horror, the pulling away. It did not come. Instead, Caleb reached out and took her hands, held them tight. I have told you about Emily, about the blood on my hands that will not wash clean. He met her eyes. You think I do not understand what it means to take a life to protect someone innocent? You think I am going to judge you for saving your daughter? It is not that simple. Yes, he pulled her close. It is exactly that simple. You did what you had to do, so did I. We carry the weight of it together. That is what this is now. What is this? He almost smiled. Home. For both of us. If you want it? Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She did not wipe them away. I want it. I want you. I want all of it. She laughed shakily. Even though it is the stupidest thing I have ever done. That makes two of us. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Clara asked the question that had been burning in her chest. What do we do about Blackwood? We fight. Caleb's face went hard. He has been winning too long. It is time someone stopped him. He has the whole town in his pocket, not everyone. Rosa hates him. There must be others, and if there are not, then we make do with what we have. He cupped her face in his hands. You and me and Lily, we have survived worse than Silas Blackwood. Have we? We have survived each other. Clara laughed despite everything, despite the wanted poster and the danger and the uncertain future looming ahead, because he was right. They had survived each other. Two broken people with the blood on their hands and ghosts in their hearts, somehow finding a way to fit together. If they could do that, they could do anything. Even face down a monster. That night, Clara made a decision. She found the card Rosa had given her months ago, the one with the address of her cousin in Texas who worked for a newspaper. She sat down at Caleb's desk and began to write. It took 3 drafts before she got it right. The whole story, from the beginning. Thomas's abuse, the night he came for Lily, what Clara had done and why. She did not beg for sympathy, did not make excuses, just told the truth, plain and simple. Then she added something else, names of neighbors who had seen the bruises, the doctor who had treated her broken ribs 2 years ago, the sheriff's wife who had once whispered, I know what he does to you, but never done anything to help. Witnesses, evidence. The things Clara had never had a chance to gather before she ran. When she was done, she sealed the letter and gave it to Rosa. Send this to your cousin. Ask him to investigate. You think it will help? Clara shrugged. I do not know. But I am done running. If they want to come for me, let them come. At least I will have told my side of the story. Rosa took the letter with something like respect in her eyes. You are braver than I thought. No. Clara looked toward the house where Caleb was putting Lily to bed. I am just tired of being afraid. That night she told Caleb what she had done. He listened without interrupting. When she was finished, he nodded. Good. You are not angry? Why would I be angry? I made a decision without asking you. You made a decision about your own life. He pulled her close. That is not something you need my permission for. Clara felt something unlock in her chest. Thomas had controlled every aspect of her existence. What she wore, what she said, who she talked to. She had not realized how much she expected the same from Caleb, until he proved her wrong. I love you, she said. The words came out before she could stop them. Before she could think about whether it was too soon, too risky, too much. Caleb went still. Then he smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes and softened the harshness of his scar. I love you too. They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other while the fire crackled and the night pressed in around them. Tomorrow would bring danger. Blackwood was out there planning. Texas was out there hunting. The whole world seemed determined to tear them apart. But tonight, they had this. And for now, it was enough. Silas Blackwood came to the ranch on a Tuesday, 10 armed riders behind him, dust rising from their horses' hooves, guns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Clara was in the garden when she heard them coming. Lily was inside, napping after a busy morning helping Caleb mend fences. Caleb stepped onto the porch with his rifle. Clara grabbed the shotgun from beside the door and joined him. Blackwood dismounted like he was arriving at a party instead of a confrontation. His smile was bright and cold. Thornton, and the lovely Mrs. McAllister. He tipped his hat. Or should I say, the wanted murderess. Get off my land, Caleb said. Now, now. Blackwood's smile widened. I come with a fair offer. Sell me this ranch at market price. You and your guest can disappear before I am forced to contact the authorities in Texas. Not interested, Clara said. Blackwood ignored her. kept his eyes on Caleb. Think carefully. That woman has a price on her head. The child will need a proper home when her mother hangs. I could provide that home. Clara's blood went cold. Caleb's rifle came up. Get off my land. Blackwood did not flinch. He turned to Clara, and something in his eyes made her stomach turn. Or we could try a different arrangement. His voice dropped, intimate and possessive. Become my wife, Mrs. McAllister. I am a widower, as it happens. I need a mother for my son. You need protection from the law. I would rather hang. Blackwood's smile thinned. That can be arranged. He signaled to one of his riders. The man rode forward holding something small and limp, Lily's cloth doll. The only toy she had brought from Texas. Clara's heart stopped. I know everything about that child, Blackwood said softly. Where she sleeps, what she eats, how she still sometimes wakes screaming for her mother. If you touch her, I do not want to touch her. I want to own her future and yours. He glanced at Caleb. You have 3 days to decide. Sell me the ranch and disappear. Give me the woman, or I will take what I want anyway. He remounted, nodded to his men. They rode away, leaving nothing but dust and silence. Clara could not stop shaking. That night, Caleb told her his plan. A wife cannot be forced to testify against her husband, and a husband has legal authority over his wife's affairs. He met her eyes. If we were married, I could claim protection for you. It is not perfect, but it is something. You want to marry me? I want to keep you alive. Whatever else it becomes is up to you. Clara thought about her first marriage, the vows that became chains, the I do that meant I own you. This was different. Caleb was different. If we do this, she said carefully, what do you expect from me? Same as now. Partnership, honesty, your company at meals and by the fire. He paused. Beyond that, whatever you want to give. Only what you want to give. Nothing demanded, ever. You would marry me and never expect... I have lived alone for 5 years. I know how to manage myself. He took her hands. This is not about claiming your body, Clara. It is about protecting your life. She looked at him. This scarred, broken, beautiful man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. Yes, you are sure? I am sure I trust you more than I have trusted anyone since before Thomas. I am sure Lily is safe with you. I am sure... She squeezed his hands. I am sure I want to stop running. I want to stand and fight. And I want to do it with you beside me. They made plans through the night. Rosa came at dawn with news of a circuit justice 3 days' ride east in Prospect Point. They could make it there and back before Blackwood's deadline. But Lily could not make the journey. The roads were too rough, the pace too hard. I will stay with her, Rosa said. At my boarding house. She will be safe. Blackwood has spies everywhere. And I have friends. Good women who hate that man as much as I do. We will keep watch. Clara did not want to leave her daughter. Every instinct screamed against it, but she had no choice. She kissed Lily goodbye at Rosa's boarding house, holding her tight. Mama will be back soon, baby. You be good for Miss Rosa. Where are you going? To get married. To Cal. Lily's face lit up. Really? He will be my papa for real? Yes, baby. For real. Clara and Caleb rode out at dawn. They pushed hard, traded horses at a way station, slept only in snatches, in shifts, never both at once. On the second night, a rider caught up with them. Rosa, her face white with terror. They took her. Blackwood's men. They came in the night. Clara felt the world fall away. Rosa held out a crumpled piece of paper. They left this. The note was short. You have 24 hours to come to Blackwood Ranch, alone, or I send you a finger. Clara read it 3 times. The words did not change. We have to go back. The wedding, Caleb started. Can wait. Number. Caleb's voice was hard. It cannot. If you face Blackwood as a wanted woman, he can drag you to Texas in chains. If you face him as my wife, with legal standing, my daughter is stronger than anyone knows. He gripped her shoulders. She survived what her father tried to do to her. She survived starving in a blizzard. She will survive this long enough for us to save her. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but she knew he was right. They found the justice of the peace in Prospect Point, half drunk but legal. 2 miners served as witnesses for $1 each. The vows took less than a minute. Clara barely heard them. All she could think about was Lily's face. "Congratulations," the justice said. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton." Caleb grabbed the certificate. "Let us ride." They made it back to Bitter Creek in 16 hours. 16 hours of Clara's heart breaking with every hoofbeat. 16 hours of imagining the worst. 16 hours until she found out if her daughter was still alive, or if she would become the monster she had always feared she could be. They gathered at Rose's boarding house before dawn. Clara, Caleb, and Deputy Jonas Whitmore, the only honest lawman in Bitter Creek. Young, idealistic, and desperate to bring Silas Blackwood down. "Lily is at the main ranch house," Jonas said. "Not the worker quarters. They're keeping her comfortable for now." "How many men?" Caleb asked. 15 on property. 10 more in town he could summon." Clara's heart sank. "We cannot fight those numbers." "We do not have to fight them all," Rosa said. "Just get in, get Lily, get out." "And Blackwood?" Jonas leaned forward. "If you can get him to confess to anything, his wife's murder, the kidnapping, anything, I can arrest him legally. His men will not fight lawful authority." Rosa provided a map of the ranch house from her time working there. The plan was simple. Clara would walk in alone, as Blackwood demanded. She would keep him talking, try to get a confession. Caleb and Jonas would infiltrate from the servants' entrance and find Lily. "I do not like you going in alone," Caleb said. "He wants me alone. If he sees you, he might hurt Lily before we can reach her." "And if he hurts you?" Clara touched his face. "Then you kill him." She said it calmly, like it was simple, because it was. Blackwood Ranch was even bigger than Clara expected, a mansion transplanted from somewhere civilized. Pillars and balconies and a sweeping staircase inside. The kind of house that said, "I own everything, including you." 47 stairs, Clara thought. He counted them as his wife fell. Silas received her in the grand parlor, dressed immaculately, like he was hosting a ball instead of holding a child hostage. Mrs. McAllister, or should I say Mrs. Thornton now. News travels fast. He smiled. "Where is my daughter?" "Safe. Unharmed. For the moment." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. We have business." Clara sat, kept her hands in her lap near the knife hidden in her sleeve. On the table between them lay a blank marriage certificate. "Your marriage to Thornton is inconvenient," Silas said, "but not insurmountable. Marriages can be annulled. Husbands can die. Sign this, and Lily goes free. And if I refuse, then she does not go free. Simple." Clara needed to stall, needed to give Caleb time. "Before I sign anything," she said, "I need to understand what I am agreeing to." "Your wife, Margaret. What happened to her?" Silas relaxed slightly. "An accident. She fell." "I have heard other stories from jealous servants. Gossip. Rosa says Margaret tried to leave." "Take your son." Something flickered in his eyes. "Rosa talks too much." "Did Margaret threaten you? Is that why?" Silas stood, began to pace. "She threatened to destroy everything I built. 20 years of work. This ranch. This town. My reputation. She was going to take Daniel to her family in Boston. Tell lies about me. So you stopped her. I protected what was mine." He turned to face Clara, the way any man would. By pushing her down the stairs, his smile returned, cold and proud. 47 stairs. I counted each one. He was confessing, Clara felt the weight of it. Outside the window, she saw movement. Jonas crouched by the wall, listening. Meanwhile, Caleb moved through the servants' quarters like a ghost. He found Lily in an upstairs bedroom, one guard outside the door. The guard never saw him coming. One blow, and the man crumpled. Caleb eased the door open. Lily sat on the bed, stone still, eyes huge. She did not cry, did not scream, just stared at him like she had been waiting. "Hey, little one, remember me?" "Cal." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Cal, you came. Always." He gathered her into his arms. "Let us go find Mama." Silas was still talking when the parlor doors burst open. Caleb stood there with Lily in his arms, Jonas behind him with his badge out. "Silas Blackwood, you are under arrest for the murder of Margaret Blackwood. I have a witness to your confession." Silas laughed. "You think anyone will believe you? I own this town." "The sheriff is not coming," Jonas said. "I wired the authorities last night. You are finished." Silas's face changed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Then he lunged for Clara. She was ready. The knife came out of her sleeve. She did not hesitate, plunged it into his shoulder. Silas screamed and fell back. "I am not your wife," Clara said, standing over him. "I am not your prisoner, and I am not the woman you can threaten into submission." He looked up at her with hatred burning in his eyes. "You will hang. Texas, maybe." Clara's voice was ice. "But you will hang first." They made it to the entrance hall before Silas's men realized something was wrong. 10 armed gunmen between them and the door. "Boss paid us through the month," their leader said. "Said if anything happened to him, we earn our keep by killing the woman and anyone with her." Caleb set Lily down behind a pillar. "Get behind me, both of you." "We are lawful authority," Jonas said. "You fire on us, it is murder. Ain't murder if there are no witnesses." Guns came up. Clara saw death coming. Then Caleb moved. She had known he was dangerous, had known he used to be the bounty hunter called Cain. But she had never seen it until now. He was fast, terrifyingly fast. 3 men fell before they could fire. His movements were brutal, efficient, perfect. Jonas took down 2 more. Clara grabbed a fallen gun and fired at the leader. Missed his chest but hit his arm. But there were too many. A bullet clipped her shoulder. She went down. In the chaos, 1 gunman circled around. Aimed at Lily. Jonas saw it. No time to aim, no time to warn. He threw himself between the bullet and the child. The shot took him in the chest. Caleb put down the shooter. Then 2 more. The rest broke and ran. Rosa rushed in from outside where she had been waiting with a wagon. She found Jonas on the floor, bleeding. "No, no, no, no." Jonas looked up at her, blood on his lips. "Tell the little girl," he whispered. "She is brave, like her mama." Then he was gone. They had won. Silas Blackwood was in custody, dragged away by deputies from the neighboring county who Jonas had contacted as backup. Lily was safe. Clara was alive. Caleb was alive. But Jonas Whitmore would never go home again. Rosa knelt beside his body, weeping. Clara held Lily and watched, understanding something she had not understood before. Victory always costs something, sometimes more than you want to pay. The funerals came first. Jonas Whitmore was buried in Bitter Creek Cemetery. Half the town attended, more than Clara expected. He had been more loved than anyone realized. Rosa spoke at the grave. Her voice broke, but she got through it. He believed the law could be just. He died, proving it. Clara stood with Caleb and Lily. The child had not spoken since the rescue. Silent again, but this time it was different. Not trauma. Processing. Sometimes healing looked like stepping backward before you could move forward. The trial took place in Cheyenne at the territorial court. Clara testified about the kidnapping. Rosa testified about Margaret's bruises. The written confession Jonas had recorded before the raid was entered into evidence. Reverend Webb, Blackwood's puppet preacher, had a change of heart at the last minute. Provided written testimony about everything Silas had made him do over the years. Webb was found dead 2 days later. Heart failure, officially. But everyone knew Silas still had reach, even from a cell. The testimony survived him. Guilty, the judge said, of murder, of kidnapping, of conspiracy. The sentence, death by hanging, to be carried out at the territorial prison within 60 days. Silas said nothing when they led him away. His eyes found Clara in the gallery. Pure hatred. She did not look away. The Texas matter was more complicated. Rosa's cousin, the journalist, had been working. He traveled to Texas, interviewed neighbors, found witnesses who knew about Thomas's violence. An elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson came forward. I heard him beating her through the walls, night after night. I should have said something years ago. The sheriff's wife admitted she had once treated Clara's injuries. She told me she fell, but I knew, we all knew. The evidence was sent to the governor's office. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at the ranch. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. After review of new evidence, the state of Texas has determined that Clara McAllister acted in justifiable defense of her child's life. The warrant for her arrest is hereby vacated. She is free to travel within the United States without fear of prosecution. Clara read it 3 times. The words did not change. I am free. She collapsed into Caleb's arms, sobbed like she had not sobbed since she was a child. 4 years of running, 4 years of hiding, 4 years of looking over her shoulder. Over. That night, they built a fire in the yard. Clara burned the wanted poster Blackwood had distributed, watched her own face curl and blacken in the flames. Caleb joined her. He was holding something too, the last of the Kane posters. With Silas's conviction, the false murder charge had been officially cleared. They burned them together. Who are we now? Caleb asked, without the things we were running from. Clara looked at him, at this scarred, broken, beautiful man who had saved her life and given her a home. I do not know, but I would like to find out. Lily came to Clara's room late that night. She climbed onto the bed without speaking, curled against her mother's side. Mama? Her voice was small. I am here, baby. The bad man cannot hurt us anymore? No, sweetheart, never again. Cal saved me. And you saved me. And the man who died saved me too. Yes, he was very brave. Lily was quiet for a long moment. I want to be brave like that. When I grow up. Clara felt tears on her cheeks. You already are, baby. You already are. They lay there together as the night deepened. 3 people, scarred but healing. A ranch that had been dying, slowly coming back to life. A marriage that had started as necessity, becoming something more. We should do it again, Clara said the next morning. Do what? Caleb looked up from his coffee. Get married. For real this time. Not in a rush, not out of fear. She met his eyes. Because I want to. Because I choose you. He crossed the room, took her face in his hands. Is that a proposal? Yes. Then yes. He kissed her like a promise. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara believed in promises again. 6 months later, autumn came to Wyoming territory in a blaze of gold and red. The ranch had transformed. Fences mended, barn repainted, cattle fat in the fields. A vegetable garden overflowing with late harvest. Chickens scratching in the yard, watched over by a dog named Biscuit that Lily had found as a stray and refused to abandon. Clara stood at the kitchen window watching Caleb teach Lily to ride in the far pasture. The child's laughter carried on the wind. She touched her stomach. 4 months along now. Just starting to show. The wedding happened on the hill behind the house. Not in a dusty courthouse this time. Not rushed, not desperate. Small gathering. Rosa, a few neighboring ranchers who had become friends, a young preacher with genuine faith and no interest in power. Clara wore a simple white dress Rosa had made for her. Your own dress, Rosa had said, not borrowed, not stolen, yours. Lily was flower girl, scattering wildflower petals with serious concentration. They faced each other in golden afternoon light, mountains behind them, everything they had survived between them. I have said vows before, Caleb began. I meant them then, but I did not understand them. I said for better or worse without knowing what worse looked like. He paused. Now I know. Worse is watching someone you love suffer and being unable to stop it. Worse is carrying guilt so heavy you forget how to stand. Worse is believing you do not deserve good things. He met Clara's eyes. You taught me different. You taught me that people who have been broken can still be whole, that hands that have done terrible things can still be gentle, that it is never too late to become someone worth loving. So here is what I promise. I will fail you sometimes. I will make mistakes. I will have nights where the past will not let me sleep. But I will always come back to you. I will always choose you. I will always fight for this family we are building. That is my vow. Not perfection, just presence. Every day. For as long as I live. Clara was crying. She did not wipe the tears. When I married Thomas, she said, I promised to obey. I did not know I was promising to disappear. For 8 years I was nobody, just a woman who existed to serve a man who did not see her. When I said yes to you in Prospect Point, I was still afraid. Afraid of trusting, afraid of hoping, afraid that marriage would always mean losing myself. She took his hands. But these months with you, I found myself instead. Not despite being with you, because of it. You make space for who I am. You do not try to make me smaller. So here is what I promise. I will stay, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because there is nowhere else I want to be. I will fight beside you, not behind you. I will be your partner, not your servant. I will love you honestly, even when honesty is hard. And I will never run again, not from you, not from us, not from this life we are building. That is my vow, not obedience, presence, for as long as I live. The preacher pronounced them married. Caleb kissed her while Lily cheered and Biscuit barked and Rosa cried into her handkerchief. That night they stood on the porch together, stars emerging, the first chill of autumn in the air. Happy? Caleb asked, terrified. Of what? Of how much I have to lose now. Clara touched her stomach. A year ago I had nothing. Now I have everything. It feels fragile. It is not fragile. It is strong. We are strong. He pulled her close. Whatever comes, we face it together. That is the difference. Promise? Just did. In front of God and everybody, she laughed, kissed him, let herself believe. 1 year later, winter. Snow falling outside, fire crackling inside. Clara sat by the window nursing their 3-month-old son. They had named him Thomas, not for her dead husband. To reclaim the name, to prove that something good could come from something terrible. Lily, now 6, sat at the kitchen table learning to read. Caleb helped her sound out words with more patience than Clara would have believed possible when she first met him. A knock at the door. Clara opened it to find a woman she had never seen. Young, exhausted, holding a bundled infant. Snow in her hair. Desperation in her eyes. Please, they said there is a woman here who helps people like me. My husband, he is... I had nowhere else. Clara looked at this stranger on her doorstep. She saw herself, 1 year ago, starving, terrified, hopeless. She opened the door wider. Come in. Get warm. We have food. She did not ask questions, did not demand explanations. She just helped. Caleb appeared in the doorway, saw the scene, understood instantly. You are safe here, he told the woman. No one will hurt you. The woman collapsed into sobs. Thank you. Thank you. Later, after she was settled in the spare room, Clara stood with Caleb by the fire. A year ago, I was her. I know, you saved my life. By just opening the door, you saved mine too. By walking through it. They held each other. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, warmth, safety, home. Clara looked around the room. Lily learning to read. Baby Thomas sleeping in his cradle. A stranger being offered shelter. A husband who saw her, truly saw her. A life that had not seemed possible 12 months ago. 1 year ago, she thought, I stood in an abandoned barn holding my dying daughter, ready to give up. Then a stranger said 4 words, "Come with me." I followed him. Not because I trusted him, because I had nothing left to lose. Now I have everything. That is not a miracle. It is a choice, made over and over. Every day, the choice to stay, the choice to fight, the choice to love, even when love is terrifying. This is what home means. Not a place where nothing bad ever happens. A place where you are not alone when it does. She crossed to the window, looked out at the snow-covered mountains that once had seemed like prison walls. Now they looked like protection. Caleb came up behind her, arms around her waist, chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking? That I am glad I followed you that night? Even though I scared the hell out of you? Especially because of that. I needed to learn that scary things can be safe. She turned in his arms. You taught me that. You taught yourself. I just opened a door. That is enough. Sometimes that is everything. Outside, the storm began to ease. First stars appeared through breaking clouds. Inside, Lily looked up from her book. Mama! I read a whole page. Baby Thomas stirred in his cradle. The woman in the spare room stopped crying. And Clara Thornton, who used to be Clara McAllister, who used to be nobody, smiled. Because she had learned something in the past year, something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Love is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to stay anyway. Family is not blood. It is the people who show up when you have nothing left to give. Home is not a place. It is a promise, kept over and over, every single day. And sometimes, just sometimes, salvation comes wearing the face of a scarred stranger with peppermint candy and 4 impossible words. Come with me. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.